Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here today to chair this panel discussion around looking at how we can accelerate the green transition. As Leah said, I'm Anne-Marie Conlon. I'm Head of Economic Development with Donegal County Council. And with us today, we have four really interesting contributors to our panel discussion. Each come from very different perspectives, and I think will give a really good kind of broad input into this whole topic around accelerating the green transition. So, and we're really looking forward to hearing the insights and the thoughts and the technology that you guys are developing in relation to this area of work. So we have today with us, we have Daniel Brown, who is the Commercial Director with Ronan Renewables. We have Dr. William Brandt, who is the founder of the Altris, a sodium-ion battery company. We also have with us Inti Gronberg, who is the founder of Ichthion. I'm hoping I'm saying these words right, and apologies if I'm not. And Inti has developed technology that is looking to restore our rivers and our oceans from plastic pollution. And on screen we have Swapnil Jagtap, and Swapnil is joining us from London, and Swapnil is pioneering low-carbon aviation technology. So we're really delighted to have such an interesting panel here with us today. So first off, I'm going to go to Daniel Brown. Daniel, you work with Ronan Renewables, a renewable energy company that has been operating in Ireland really since the early 1990s, and I know that you're really interested in looking at what, I suppose really this part of the island of Ireland and the opportunities that exist around renewable energy. So, Daniel, can you tell us, in your opinion, what do you think needs to be done in terms of accelerating this green transition?
Thanks, Anne-Marie, and welcome, everybody. I suppose there's three things, and they're not universal to Ireland. I mean, we are blessed here in the Northwest with amazing wind resource. We've got great solar radiation with the long days. We've got, a lot of great natural resources. But the three problems, the three roadblocks, and I think they're pretty universal: legislation, grid infrastructure, and market adoption. And just to put those in context for people, legislation, if we start today to build even a small, modest, 4-turbine wind farm, you're talking 7 years. We don't have that time. The MARA legislation, which is a single consenting regime for offshore floating technology, which is going to be deployed at scale off the west coast of Ireland, the legislation's been delayed by a year to make it happen. We don't have time for those delays. So we hear these great promises at Glasgow, etc., this great aspiration about what we got to achieve, but when it comes down to the granular level, the legislation doesn't have the sense of urgency that it needs to have to achieve. In terms of grid, I think, and interested in the guy's view, but fairly widely accepted, 75% of everything is going to be electrified. The other 25% is going to be hydrogen-based or other fuel solutions, etc. And right now, we don't have the grid infrastructure to handle that. I mean, hands up everybody here who's got an electric car. There's a few, but everybody in this room should be driving an electric car within 10 years. And our grid's not going to be able to support that. And in Donegal, here where we have the natural resource, it's a problem of getting it down the road. And then finally, that market adoption piece. We need everybody in this room to be having an electric car. We need the people who are going to be using hydrogen technology to be investing in it now. So I think those three things would be the main points to me.
Okay, thanks very much, Daniel. Thank you. Dr. William Brandt, do you want to respond maybe to some of the things that Daniel has just raised there, and what's your own thoughts in relation to accelerating the transition?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the legislation, this is something that we are fighting as well, because we want to define ourselves at Altris with our sodium-ion batteries differently to lithium-ion batteries, because we don't have the same problems that they do, in particular with transportation of the batteries. So we need to, in order to really leverage that, we need separate legislation applied to us, rather than just being bundled in with lithium-ion battery technology. So that is actually one very specific hurdle that we need to face to enable uptake of the technology. And it's an important thing that you mentioned as well in regards to the infrastructure and electrification. especially within Europe, there is a huge drive and a push to have more batteries out in society with electric vehicles. And this is happening today with more than 30 gigafactories planned for Europe. So where are those batteries going to go when they're being planned for production? So yeah, this is also a really important point.
Yeah, great. And when we were talking earlier this week, William, you talked about the fact that we have been relying, I suppose, on fossil fuels for such a long period of time in terms of energy. And you said to me, we can't rely on just one solution in terms of green energy. We need to be looking at other solutions. Tell us a bit about that and what your thinking is around that.
Yeah, so I have 3 thoughts around this, why we can't just rely on one. So naturally, and when I started this journey in renewable technologies about 12 years ago, it was a large criticism that I always face that different renewable technologies there's no silver bullet. They always have some disadvantages. They're not suited to all kinds of situations. But that might actually be a good thing today. So we need to look at the right technology for the right application, things that are really fit for purpose to be able to target specific problems around the world. And specifically within energy storage, which is Ultras's main focus, there are different applications where specific types of batteries are needed. So you could go for high power, or you could go for energy storage density, or perhaps long life. And if you want to make a battery for those applications, you need to really tailor the entire system to that. So in order to accelerate Ultras's time to market and accelerate the green transition, we have to focus on just one area, which for us is stationary energy storage. And so then there may be other technologies or other battery technologies that go for the other sectors. And this is needed in order to really accelerate the time to market for sodium-ion batteries. In that sense, the second point is you really need to sort of diversify the market with different actors and different companies, because the best way to accelerate the green transition is to have multiple solutions working in tandem, running simultaneously to address the needs of society, because the demand is huge. Some of these solutions may not be perfect, but they will be good enough. And this will bridge the gap and sort of make society ready for more green technology in the future. The final point for why we really need to have a diverse set of solutions is in terms of the material requirements. So it was mentioned yesterday by Martin that we are going to replace lithium-ion batteries with sodium-ion batteries. Of course, even if sodium-ion batteries were performance-wise on par with lithium, the sheer demand for batteries and the demand for raw material is so huge that if we just switched entirely over to another technology, we would still be facing the same problems that we're facing with lithium, which is a limited supply of raw material. We are on a planet with limited resources, so we need to spread out that demand over multiple technologies, so we're not just, digging another hole for ourselves. And so that's a really important thing that we can't forget about, that this demand is going to keep increasing, so we really need to spread it out.
Okay, thank you very much, thank you. And Inti, we're going to hear a little bit more about your own company in a few minutes' time and the work that you have been doing in terms of your own technology. But just go back to what William was talking about in relation to the need for that diversification. What's your own thoughts about that in terms of the transition to green energy?
Well, I believe it's really important to consider the whole picture, because what we should try to avoid is to making the same mistakes that is coming now to humanity to be here in the first place. The whole system is developed based on a linear economy that sometimes we don't think where the material comes from, what happened with that material after we use. So what happens if we are going to drive this energetic transition and then we don't know from where the material comes from. We don't know how is the source of mining. Sometimes we forget about what happened in developing countries that are sourcing that material and what are the challenges that they have to make this in a renewable way. And the same thing for the recycling process. So how we are going to source that material after it's being utilized. Because if we just drive the transition thinking about how to implement these things without analyzing the aspects that took to humanity to be in this part, the linear economy and the transition towards circularity, we are going to have similar problems that we are facing now. That is evident what is happening not only in climate change, but the loss of biodiversity, for example. One of the reasons of the pandemic is that humans are entering into more contact with species that we were not entering before and more frequently. And this is because we are basically degrading entire ecosystems on this search of looking for new materials. So the change is not only about new technologies that replace fossil fuels, it's also about thinking how we are going to do this in a sustainable way. And that brings us new challenges. And some of them are not only about selling the technology, it's how we incorporate this in new areas of the world, in the developing world. What can they can do for that? And if they are going to, for example, recycling these technologies, they need to know about it. They need to understand it. So that's a huge challenge that we have as a society, driving this transition that we needed, but do it without learning from the mistakes that we have been doing in the last decades.
Thank you very much, Inti. Thank you. And going now to Swapnil online. Swapnil, you've heard the responses from William and Inti in relation to that question around, looking at diversification in terms of the green energy transition. And you're working on your low carbon aircraft technology. What's your own views just around that, and where do you see that, I suppose, in the context of the work that you're doing?
First of all, continue from where I think Daniel and William left in terms of diversification of power systems and basically diversification of different energy systems. We would like to also consider this one point about every geographical location having their own energy needs, as well as how that demand can be sort of supported. So not every country or not every continent would be able to power their needs, maybe from solar or from wind or from tidal energy or from hybrid systems. So basically, the need for diversification is there, and more so ever, we also need a decentralized way of power production and supplying the energy needs of every continent or region. Continuing from the need for matured infrastructure, given that there will be a increase in demand in future, reliability is an important factor. So something like reliability on, let's say, batteries to power electric vehicles. Safety considerations. There were several examples, I think, here in India, that some of the electric bikes they caught fire, or they were not able to actually run the required distance as it was promised by the manufacturer. And also there is not sufficient infrastructure to actually power that electric bike, as in like for charging purposes. So there is a need for also matured infrastructure to support the green technology that comes up. Particularly for my research, I believe there is a requirement for a more collaborative effort between the government, industry, academia, as well as climate groups. In terms of the requirement from the government, maybe there are existing metrics and measures set up according to the IPCC towards climate change Paris Treaty. However, there is not enough that is being done by every government. There are a few handful countries that are able to actually go in line with what they have promised to work towards Paris Treaty Agreement. Particularly for my research towards disruptive fuel like liquid hydrogen for long-range air travel, there is a need for a major transition in the fuel supply chain, airport infrastructure, change in aircraft design, perception of passengers regarding safety of hydrogen as a fuel. All this entails trillions of dollars of investment, R&D, manufacturing, testing, etc. So this overall requires a systemic change, and it also mandates more collaborative efforts, especially given we are in a post-pandemic era. There is a need for and also there is a clear evidence that climate change is the most important event that we might see or in the near future. We need to create collective pressure on the government as well as on the industry to bring in more specific regulatory and technological shift, though the whole thing is not an overnight phenomenon. So it has to be a continued process.
Okay, thank you very much, Swapnil. And kind of staying with you for a few minutes, I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about what you think government and universities and other support organisations can do to kind of support innovators like you, and particularly maybe referencing your own experience in terms of the work that you've been doing in your own pioneering area of expertise. So maybe just what can governments and universities and other support organisations do to help innovators like you?
Yeah, as I mentioned that particularly in my area, which is like quite a niche area of aviation, which contributes to roughly 5% of total man-made climate impacts. And just to make a fun of myself, I'm like a rich man's mechanical engineer. So basically, this area is not like aviation is not an area that is used by 100% of the population. It's barely used by like 5 to 10% of population who has the money to travel, right? So this is basically like a rich man's sector, if I can say that. So basically, there is a lot of work that needs to be done collaboratively. Especially the aviation industry is burnt up in the past 5 odd years, especially now that we have seen that COVID has hit, and the aviation industry is sort of go back to normalcy. So there is a need for a collaborative effort from the government, industry, academia, and also the climate change activist groups, so that collectively we can make this change to a greener society.
Okay, thanks very much, Swapnil. I might just go back to Daniel just again, kind of on, you've talked about the challenges that we're facing on the island of Ireland just in terms of accelerating the transition. What do you think government and universities can do to support innovators and innovative organisations like your own just in terms of accelerating that transition?
Thanks, Emery. I think we're at a point where we need to get away from aspiration and we need to get down to a granular community level now. Kind of following from what William and Inti were saying earlier as well, there isn't a silver bullet. So what might work in Killybegs, which is an area we're fairly invested in, might not work in Louth. And we've got to start going, okay, what's the solution for this community now? So academic research at a very high level is great, but I think we're getting beyond that. We need to get down and go, this community, 20 years from now, what is it going to need? It's going to need X amount of hydrogen, it's going to need X amount of electricity, it's going to need X amount of ammonia. Right, let's work back from that now. And then, crucially, what's the financial sense and tipping point and pathway forward to allow companies and individuals to make those investments today? So I think, the academic work that has been done has been absolutely amazing and continues to be crucial. But I think the next step in that now is to get granular down to a community by community basis and say, what's the solution for this community 20 years from now? And we need to do that across the entire world and work out what's the solution community by community.
Thanks very much, Daniel. I see, William, you're nodding your head. Do you want to add, do you want to contribute a bit to that?
Yeah, actually, a thought that I had about something that really helped our company from the local support was the networks that it builds and the people that it connects us to. And in particular, going to this granularity and looking at the local communities, connecting those local communities, identifying what they need, and then connecting it to the companies that can provide exactly what it is they need. So for us, that is really important now to actually see, we have this solution, but of course you always need to find a customer. That's really critical, and these networks and connections is really important for a lot of startups.
Okay, great. I've just been getting a timing warning there, so I'm going to just finish with one more question, and I'll direct it to Inti and to Swapnil. Just in your own words, what is the one thing you think needs to happen now to accelerate this green transition? I think Daniel's already answered it from his perspective, so I'll just ask you, Inti, and I'll go to you, Swapnil, just to finish up the panel discussion.
Sure. Something really important is to understand how innovation is created now. Sometimes we try to copy what is happening in other countries. Sometimes we try to copy the idea of the ecosystem of Silicon Valley. But it's completely different how we do innovation in different places. And this is a field of knowledge that it has at least 60 years. So when we think about deploying innovation, developing innovation, we need to be a bit more technical in that sense. So getting the data and understanding how we can do this. It's not the same developing technology here in Europe or in particular places in Europe that in Latin America, for example. And all needs to be connected. And one of the key things within that is financing. So really do the work and not only speak about the transition, but putting money into it. That's really important, especially in the early stage of development, to have technology before people receive investment, companies like we do. We need support, we need grants, we need that amount of money that is able to create then the next level of innovations that then this is going to receive funding and can scale globally.
Thank you, Inti. And I just have about a minute left. Swapnil, do you want to just come in on that? What is the one thing you think needs to happen just to accelerate this transition?
I think the foremost thing that should be done is educating general population about their carbon footprint and their climate footprint. Basically, we had a fantastic opportunity in the lockdown of 2020 to make this transition, but given one or two instances, we are not able to really get into this transition mode. So I think we also need to change our habits in terms of food, traveling, and also clothing. And likewise, as William was mentioning, there is no way that there is sort of, they're not able to sort of cater to that sort of the demand. So basically, there needs to be an interaction between the user or the customer and also the industry, such that the industry makes available the footprint of their product or processes. So overall, if we make this, this integration of customer with the industry, I think there would be a sort of more sustainable ecosystem, if I can call that.
Thank you very much, Swapnil. Thank you. And thanks to all our panelists today. It was a really interesting discussion. And thank you for giving us your time this morning. And thank you to the audience as well for listening. And I'll just hand you back, I think, to Leah. Thank you very much.